How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another Fallout 76 build guide, and today we're going to be covering the One Punch Man build, or otherwise known as the Unarmed PA build. Now this build is mainly for fun. It does have the ability to solo the raid if you have fuel canisters and if you pair it with the Shredder minigun, but also it does a lot of extra damage, especially if you do team play. But in this video, we're going to be covering everything from perk cards, perk distributions, to the gear that we're going to use, buffs, and then showcase all the damage as a solo as well as in team. We'll also be covering how to double punch so you guys can increase the DPS and have a little bit more fun with this build. So with that, let's get right to it. Now you can pause the video if you would like, but our perk point distribution is 15 strength, 4 perception, 10 endurance, 9 charisma, 13 intelligence, and 1 agility. Now for the perk cards, this is what we have running, so if you want to pause the video you can. We will have a link in the description as well. Now this build will work for the raids and work for all of the other nuke bosses, but there are some things that you can change to optimize it a little bit better so you can do a little bit more inside of the raids. Especially if you're trying to solo the Guardian just for fun. So some recommendations to allow you to use the Shredder minigun is get rid of Blocker, put on Basher, and use rank 2 Bone Shatterer. You can then use the Shredder minigun at the generator for stage 1 and use it on the snake when you need to. Now for the rest of the build, I would like to think that this is a little bit standard, but we do have Tormentor and Rad Reaver for perception, Tormentor for more nuke bosses if anything, so you can do more damage there. And then we have Radiation Power. You can remove that if you want, if the consumption of your glow is a little bit too much. But moving on to Charisma, we have our Party Boy to increase our whiskeys. And then we have our United Ordeal for potential strength. We have 15 intelligence because science does scale the Tesla bracers for the power armor that we are going to be using. And for agility and luck, it's just mainly utility. So let's move on to the legendary perk cards. Now for our legendary perks, we have maxed out endurance, luck, intelligence, strength, and agility. For the 6th card, it is completely optional. Now, if you've seen any of my previous builds or any future builds, these are the same 5 cards that we'll be using. Now let's teach you guys how to double punch so you can increase the DPS of this build or any of your unarmed power armor builds. Now, in order to double punch is a very simple thing. What you need to do is sprint towards your target, and as you press your power attack button, let go of your movement, and if you did it correctly, you'll see that your arm will do 2 animations of punching that will trigger 2 attacks that do register on your enemies. Unfortunately, this only works in power armor and only in 3rd person. It does not work for outside of PA, and it does not work while you're in 1st person. Now another fun little tip and trick that you can do is if you want to keep moving while you're punching, if you're sprinting, use your power attack button instead of your regular punch, because if you use your power attack, you'll be able to maintain your sprint. If you use a regular punch, it will stop you from sprinting. You can still move forward, but it stops you. You'll have to re-trigger your sprint again. So it's a fun little thing if you guys wanted to try that out or might find it useful. Now let's go ahead and check out our buffs and armor. Now for our armor set, we're going to be using a full set of Vulcan's PA, and we're going to be using the Vanguard's Strength, Through Hikers, and Rejuvenator's legendary mods. We're using Rejuves because it allows us to maintain our infinite sprint and also manage our power attacks when we are fighting. For our torso mod, we're going to be using motion assisted servos for additional strength for melee damage. And then for our helmet, we're going to be using the internal database to scale our science perk card for energy damage. Now moving on to the arms, this is the most important part of this build. If you do not have this mod, it will not work. And that is the Tesla Bracers power armor mod. Other power armor sets do have this, but not all of them. So off the top of my head, I believe Union PA has this, T65, and Hellcat. So if that's what you want to use, you can if you would like. But without this mod, you will not be dealing any damage. Now for our legs, it's the standard calibrated chocks for that extra carry weight. But now let's go ahead and move on over to our buffs. These broiled Scorch Beast Brains is not required, but it does help with a little bit of extra damage because you can scale your science perk card with this. The 2 main food buffs I would recommend is the Deathclaw Wellington, which gives you the highest strength, or the Deathclaw Steak for the lowest strength. And then the Tasty Yaoguai Roast, which is one of the 3 highest melee % damage buffs, or you can use the alternatives for the lower amounts. Now, if you have access to the Black Eyed Susan Soothins, you can also use that for additional damage. But for the alcohols, you can use whiskey, which is a lot easier to maintain and manage, and easier to farm. But you can also use the Nuka Shine, the Vintage, or the Sugar Free. Sugar Free is more recommended because you don't have to worry about teleporting. For our aid items, we're using the US Covert 8 and the Unarmed Melee Bobblehead, or the Unarmed Bobblehead. If I remember correctly, melee does work, but it's just 5% less damage. Now, since this is a ghoul build, do not use any kind of chem, because the 150% increased damage, melee damage that you'll be getting from being feral is significantly more than the 30 to 25% damage that you'll be getting from a chem. So make sure you do not use any chems at all. Now let's move on to the Guardian. This is the solo run. We are using the Shredder minigun so we could take out the shield generator. And we are using all the buffs that we just mentioned, whiskey being the alcoholic beverage of choice. Now, when you're in a team, you're going to be doing significantly more, but as a solo, we're hitting for 20,000 per hit. And that's a power attack, not regular swing. And you can see that we're using the double tap for the extra damage, which means we're hitting for 40,000 every time we do a double swing. You can technically use this just using the regular single power attacks, but you are going to be either cutting it very close or you're just not going to make it because it's not enough DPS. But as you can see, we are able to clear this Guardian with no problems at all. Now let's move on to the team gameplay. I do apologize for any of the on-screen widgets that you guys see. These are clips that were pulled from one of my previous streams, and it's just a little bit easier because I have all of my buffs active during this time. Now, one of two things could happen. You can have either a strong team that is able to take out the shield very quickly, or if you wanted to be the one to take out the shield, of course you can opt in for the Shredder minigun, which is what we are going to be doing here. But I want you guys to keep in mind the amount of damage that we dealt as a solo. We were hitting for 20,000. And since we're in a team, we have access to significantly more things like herd mentality, better buffs because of our carnivore mutation being affected by stringent numbers. And you're about to see the amount of damage that we're able to do on this torso. Now, one of the downsides of this build is using radiation power because it does consume your AP, but it's not super duper fast unless you're using a Shredder minigun. But now that the shield is down, we're going to be double tapping for 30,000 per hit. That's 10,000 more damage than we were solo. And you can see the amount of chunk damage that we're able to do to the torso, on top of our entire team being fairly strong. Super duper fun, I highly recommend it. Now for stage 2, it does kind of struggle a bit because if you're like me and you suck at aiming, trying to land a double punch on a smaller target is kind of painful, but as you just saw there, we were able to absolutely obliterate Vulture, and we can do the same for the other 3 or the remaining 2 Guardians or soldiers that are left over. Now trying to solo this stage with just the unarmed build can be a little bit rough, but it's doable. Now for the snake, this is the only stage that I would say is required to use the Shredder minigun, because even if you use a jetpack to get up to the snake and punch, you're going to do some damage, but the snake is a little bit tankier than the rest of the enemies in the raid. So even if you're hitting for 5, 6, 7k damage, it's only going to do small amounts. So this is the only exception for the raids where the Shredder is needed. But other than that, the build runs fairly fine within the entire raid, and it is so much fun. Now when it comes to nuke bosses, this is a different story because now you're going to be able to take advantage of perk cards like Tormentor, because since all the nuke bosses in the open world are able to be crippled and multiple parts being crippled as well, you'll be able to scale your damage even further, which is very, very nice. Now unfortunately, the currently playing XB is covering the health bar of Nona, the Guardian that we are fighting. But if you notice, we do have an auto-axe user, but even though they're hitting the legs, all the damage is actually being done from the punches. If you look at the right side where it says Storm Goliath Nona, that damage is all the punches with the combined damage of the auto-axe user. And then we're moving on to the second one to try and take as much health down as we can. But even if all the Goliaths are dead and only is one remaining, you can still do some pretty decent damage and chunk them fairly well with this build. With or without double tapping if you are not into the double tap. Now for the queen, same instance, the damage is great. Like we're hitting for 4.5 on the queen's torso, 8k on the head, but once we start getting our take one for the team procs and science monster procs, we're going to be hitting for the, I believe, like 12,000 per hit. And of course with the double tap, that's 24k per double tap. But it can get a little tedious again for the glow, because you have to have that up if you really want to make your damage shine. But all in all, this build is so much fun. About 95% of the enemies you can one tap, and it is just running around and just punching things is the greatest feeling in this game. Like, yeah, you're not melting things, but you can beat the hell out of things, and it is great. But that about covers it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the build, and hopefully if you do try it, let me know in the comments on what you think, and hopefully you guys found the information useful, and if you guys have questions, please let me know. Again, this build is more for fun. This isn't some super OP meta build. It's just something that you can screw around with that actually is viable for basically everything in the game. Now, if you're not the type of person to use a lot of buffs, you don't have to. This build works beautifully without any buffs, and before Vulcan PA ever came out, I used to use my Union PA with Tesla bracers, so if my weapon ever broke or if I just felt like not using a weapon, I just punch everything without any kind of build. But other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, thank you so much for watching. Happy hunting, good luck, and I'll see you guys in the next one.